And I just want to say that I've found this evening's talk, both the lecture and the discussion afterwards, quite inspiring. I don't think anyone will be caught off guard in this room at the fact that we're living in a very difficult time. And as somebody who talks to a lot of people often about the time that we're living in and the lived experience of so many people as they live through the economic challenge that we're living in, and the political challenges and the change in political tone over the last few years. Something that's been a long time in the making, but was accelerated by the pandemic. I think, tonight's talk, and particularly, I think that the theme of love and hope is a really important one, because there's a lot of division right now, and I think it's incumbent upon us, all of us, to try and find a path out of the divisive, angry polarization that's dividing us and that has a great potential for harm. To find a path to a brighter future. There were some moments during the pandemic when that felt very possible, when Canadians in the early part of the pandemic accepted the argument that we needed to support each other, that we needed to look not just at temporary income relief, but to ideas like a guaranteed basic income as something not just for the immediate situation of the pandemic, but perhaps a positive lesson that could be taken out of the pandemic and build a more just future. So we talked a little bit about anger and the way that love can bring about anger, and a kind of righteous anger, appropriately righteous anger. But there's a lot of anger that's not grounded in love today. And, they say oppression breeds solidarity, and anger can bring about certain kinds of solidarity. And I think, it's important for the left, I think, in this moment to appreciate and give voice to the legitimate anger that so many people feel about the way they're being treated in the economy, about the way they're being treated by the powers that be. But it has to be an anger that's grounded in love. It can't just be the tear it down anger. There's a lot of that on offer. There's people very deliberately and explicitly selling that anger that comes from a place of a kind of selfishness, because it doesn't have the love that would direct that anger not on ourselves, not to tear things apart, but an anger that is focused on outcomes. And I think that's the anger that's grounded in love. That's the anger that says it's not enough just to get together and be angry and destroy things and feel good about the fact that we ripped it apart. It's an anger that says we have to come through this together, and we have to land somewhere where we don't live in a society that structurally produces this anger, that structurally produces the injustices that give rise to this anger. That's the anger grounded in love that I think is an important part of the social gospel tradition, but as Wab rightly pointed out, is an important part of many spiritual traditions. And as David Woodbury rightly pointed out, many secular traditions that nevertheless, and I'm going to borrow this term from a Canadian thinker and New Democrat and socialist Charles Taylor, our moral sources. And so the left has to find a way, I think, and of connecting with so many people for whom their moral sources are spiritual sources. It doesn't mean that we have to say that everybody must be spiritual, but it means that we have to find a way to talking to the so many people out there for whom those moral sources are spiritual sources, and to find in that ecumenical dialogue and that interfaith dialogue ways of translating for each other to show the extent to which we're on the same page and that a better world is possible. And so I want to thank once again Professor Dorian for having given us a window into how that might be done, not the only way that it could be done, but an example of how people at various times in our history within the social gospel movement have tried to do that, so that we might go out into the world and try and do that in our own ways, in our own communities, with the faith traditions and the important secular moral traditions that inspire the people in our communities today. So thank you very much for giving us a particular example from history of how we might go out and try and replicate the best of that work and leave the rest. And thank you to everybody who came out this evening to be part of what I think is a really exciting speaking series that, as Josh pointed out, through the good work of the Douglas Coldwell Layton Foundation, isn't just happening here at the University of Winnipeg, but is going from coast to coast to coast and will be available to everyone in Winnipeg through live stream and after recordings, so that if you are inspired by this speaking series, you don't just have to wait for it to come to your own town. You can participate directly from wherever you are in the country or indeed the world. So thank you again to everyone who did the work of putting it together. Thank you for Professor Dorian for such an inspiring talk, and thank you to a wonderful audience for having been here to support this evening.